Florida, 2024. She brought down a governor with just two things: an expensive lipstick and a red lace underwear planted beneath the bed in the governor's mansion. Unseen and with relentless cunning, a perfectly executed frame job. The media exploded. The wife filed for divorce. The governor was forced to leave office. This is another intriguing investigation that our Agent Scott will help us understand. Some political careers end with corruption charges. Others end with failed policies or public outrage. But Governor Richard Castellano of Florida never imagined his would be threatened by a red lipstick and a pair of lace underwear found beneath his bed, items that weren't his wife's and that he swore he'd never seen before in his life. The morning of October 3rd started like any other for Governor Castellano. He woke at 6:30, kissed his wife Sarah goodbye as she prepared for her morning yoga class, and headed to the state capitol for what would be a routine day of budget meetings and legislative reviews. He had no idea that by sunset his political career would be in ruins, his marriage on the verge of collapse, and his name would be the top trending topic across every social media platform in America. Sarah Castellano had been married to Richard for 22 years. She'd stood by him through 3 successful election campaigns, raised their 2 children, while he built his political career, and never once questioned his loyalty or integrity. She was the picture of a devoted political spouse, gracious, supportive, and utterly trusting. Until that afternoon when she decided to surprise her husband by personally overseeing the deep cleaning of their private residence at the governor's mansion. The housekeeper, Maria Rodriguez, had been with the Castellano family for 8 years. She was meticulous, trustworthy, and knew every corner of the mansion. But that day, as she moved the large bed in the master bedroom to vacuum beneath it, she froze. There, pushed against the wall in the shadows where no one would casually notice, lay a pair of bright red lace underwear and a tube of expensive crimson lipstick, the kind that left distinct marks, the kind meant to be noticed. Maria's hands trembled as she called Mrs. Castellano into the room. Sarah stood in the doorway, staring at the items on the floor, her face draining of color. Those weren't hers. She'd never owned underwear that color, never wore that shade of lipstick. And suddenly, 22 years of trust shattered in an instant. How long? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. How long has this been going on? But Maria had no answers. The underwear and lipstick were just there, hidden but not well enough, like someone wanted them to be found eventually, like evidence deliberately placed for discovery. What happened next would change everything. Sarah Castellano, devastated and furious, didn't confront her husband privately. She didn't wait for explanations or demand a conversation. In her pain and rage, she did something that would cascade into a political disaster. She called David Morrison, a veteran political journalist she'd known for years, someone she trusted to tell the truth. Within 3 hours, the story broke. Scandal at the governor's mansion. Evidence of affair found in master bedroom. The headline screamed across news websites, social media, and cable news networks. Photos of the governor's mansion, speculation about the mysterious woman, and breathless commentary about political hypocrisy dominated every channel. By evening, the hashtag Castellano scandal was trending nationally. Governor Castellano learned about the allegations not from his wife, but from his chief of staff, who burst into a budget meeting with a tablet showing the breaking news. Richard stared at the screen, genuinely confused. Red underwear? Crimson lipstick? He'd never seen those items in his life. He tried calling Sarah immediately, but she wouldn't answer. She'd already moved to their second home in Palm Beach, taking the children with her, refusing all contact. The political fallout was immediate and brutal. Opposition party leaders demanded his resignation. Members of his own party distanced themselves, afraid of being associated with the scandal. Editorial boards called for investigations. Social media erupted with mockery, outrage, and endless speculation about who the mystery woman might be. Within 48 hours, under immense pressure from party leadership and facing potential impeachment proceedings, Governor Richard Castellano announced he would take a temporary leave of absence while the matter was investigated. The press conference was painful to watch. Governor Castellano stood at the podium, his face drawn and exhausted, maintaining his innocence even as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions about his infidelity. "I have never been unfaithful to my wife," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I have never seen those items before. I don't know how they came to be in my home, but I swear to you and to my wife that I am innocent of these accusations. I will find out the truth, and I will clear my name." But the damage was done. The lieutenant governor assumed temporary control of the state government. Sarah still refused to speak to him. Their children were being harassed at school, and Richard Castellano found himself living in a hotel, his reputation destroyed, his family shattered, all because of 2 items he'd never touched. That's when he made the call that would change everything. Agent John Scott had built a reputation for solving impossible cases, the kind of investigations where the obvious answer wasn't the real answer, where someone had gone to great lengths to construct a false narrative. When his phone rang at 11 p.m. on October 7th, and he heard the exhausted voice of Florida's suspended governor on the other end, he knew this would be one of those cases. "Agent Scott, I need your help," Governor Castellano said, his voice rough from stress and sleepless nights. "I know how this looks. I know what everyone thinks. But I'm telling you the truth. I've been framed. Someone planted that evidence in my home to destroy me, and I need you to prove it before I lose everything that matters." Agent Scott listened as the governor explained the timeline. The discovery, the media explosion, the political pressure. He asked pointed questions. Who had access to the mansion? Had there been any unusual visitors? Any new staff members? Any security breaches? The governor answered each question, his desperation evident, but his story consistent. He wasn't the behavior of a guilty man trying to craft a cover story. This was a man genuinely bewildered by what had happened to his life. "I'll take the case," Agent Scott said finally, "but I need complete access to your home, your schedule, your staff, everything. And I need you to understand something. If I find evidence that you're lying, I walk away. I don't cover up the truth for anyone." "I'm not lying," Governor Castellano replied. "Find the truth, Agent Scott. That's all I ask." Agent Scott arrived in Tallahassee the next morning, ready to dive into an investigation that would prove far more complex and sinister than a simple affair. Because what looked like a sex scandal was actually something much darker, a carefully orchestrated political assassination designed to destroy a governor's career and reputation using nothing more than a lipstick and a pair of underwear. The question was, who hated Richard Castellano enough to go to such elaborate lengths? And how had they managed to plant evidence in one of the most secure residences in the state without being detected? Agent Scott stood outside the governor's mansion, studying the building's security features, the camera placements, the guard stations. Someone had gotten inside. Someone with access, knowledge, and a plan. And Agent Scott was going to find them, no matter how deep he had to dig. The investigation had begun, and the truth, as Agent Scott had learned over 2 decades of detective work, was always more complicated than it first appeared. Agent Scott's first 48 hours in Tallahassee were spent doing what he did best, questioning everything and trusting no one. The governor's mansion wasn't just a home, it was a fortress with multiple layers of security, background-checked staff, and constant surveillance. Getting past all of that to plant evidence required more than opportunity. It required planning, access, and insider knowledge. His first stop was the mansion's security office, where he reviewed footage from the week leading up to the discovery. The head of security, Captain James Walsh, a 30-year veteran of the Florida State Police, walked him through the protocols. "Every entrance is monitored 24/7, Captain Walsh explained, pulling up multiple camera feeds on his computer. Staff members use key cards that log entry and exit times. Visitors are signed in, escorted, and signed out. The private residential quarters are off limits to everyone except family, personal staff, and pre-approved cleaners. Show me everyone who had access to the master bedroom in the 2 weeks before October 3rd, Agent Scott requested. Captain Walsh pulled up the access logs. The list was surprisingly short. Governor and Mrs. Castellano, obviously, Maria Rodriguez, the housekeeper, and 3 additional housekeeping staff members who worked rotating shifts. That was it. No visitors, no maintenance workers, no unexpected entries. Agent Scott studied each name, each timestamp. I need backgrounds on all the housekeeping staff. Full employment history, references, anything unusual in their hiring process. Within hours, he had the files. Maria Rodriguez, 8 years with the family, impeccable record, personal recommendation from the previous governor's residence manager. Thomas Chun, 4 years former hotel hospitality worker, clean background. Patricia Valdez, 6 years, mother of 3, no issues. And then there was the 4th name, Jennifer Reeves. Jennifer Reeves had been hired 6 months earlier to help with the increased workload during the busy legislative season. According to her employment file, she came with excellent references from a staffing agency in Miami, had experience in high-end residential cleaning, and had passed all background checks. She worked 2 days a week, always professional, always efficient. Agent Scott stared at her photo in the personnel file. Late 20s. Attractive, but not memorable. The kind of person who could blend into any environment without drawing attention. Something about her felt wrong, but he couldn't articulate why. It was instinct, the kind developed over years of reading people and situations. I need to speak with Jennifer Reeves, Agent Scott told Captain Walsh. She hasn't been back since the scandal broke, Walsh replied, checking the logs. Last shift was October 2nd, the day before the discovery. She was scheduled to work again on October 5th, but she called in sick, said she had the flu. Haven't seen her since. Agent Scott felt the familiar tingle of a lead developing. get me her contact information. Address, phone number, references, everything. The address on file led to a modest apartment complex in South Tallahassee. Agent Scott drove there immediately, but when he knocked on apartment 2C, there was no answer. The building manager, a retired postal worker named Frank, confirmed that Jennifer Reeves had moved out suddenly. Paid through the end of the month, but left 3 days ago, Frank said, scratching his head. Didn't give notice, didn't ask for her deposit back, just cleared out overnight. I thought it was strange, but people do weird things sometimes. Did she leave anything behind? Agent Scott asked. Frank led him to the apartment. It had been cleaned thoroughly, too thoroughly. No personal items, no trash, nothing that would indicate who Jennifer Reeves really was. But Agent Scott had learned long ago that people always leave something behind, no matter how careful they are. He spent an hour searching the empty apartment, checking drawers, closets, even the spaces behind appliances. And then, wedged behind the bathroom radiator, he found it. A small receipt from a boutique in Miami, dated 2 months earlier. The purchase: 1 tube of Crimson Persuasion, lipstick, and a set of designer lingerie. The same items found beneath the governor's bed. Agent Scott photographed the receipt and immediately called his contact at the Miami Police Department, Detective Maria Reyes. Within an hour, she'd pulled security footage from the boutique. And there, captured on camera, was Jennifer Reeves, or whoever she really was, making the purchase and paying cash. But it was what Detective Reyes found next that broke the case wide open. The boutique's sales associate remembered the customer because she'd asked unusual questions. Specifically, whether the lipstick and underwear would leave DNA evidence, and how long such items could be stored before biological traces degraded. That's not the question an affair partner asks, Agent Scott noted grimly. That's the question someone planting evidence asks. He dug deeper into Jennifer Reeves' background, and slowly the fiction began to unravel. The references from the Miami staffing agency? The agency existed, but they had no record of Jennifer Reeves. The background check? It had been done, but the Social Security number belonged to a woman who died 5 years earlier. Jennifer Reeves was a completely fabricated identity. Agent Scott contacted the FBI's Cybercrime Division, and within 24 hours they traced the fake identity back to a sophisticated identity theft operation. But more importantly, they found digital breadcrumbs, email communications between the fake Jennifer Reeves account and another encrypted account discussing the Miami job and confirming payment of $50,000. Following the money took another 48 hours of forensic accounting, tracing cryptocurrency transactions through multiple digital wallets and offshore accounts. But eventually the trail led to a single source, a political action committee controlled by Senator Marcus Whitfield, Governor Castellano's primary rival in the upcoming gubernatorial election. Senator Whitfield had been trailing Castellano by 15 points in every poll. He was charismatic, well-funded, but couldn't overcome Castellano's popularity and track record. So he'd done what desperate politicians sometimes do. He decided to destroy his opponent's reputation rather than defeat him legitimately. The woman who'd called herself Jennifer Reeves was actually Elena Cortez, a private investigator with a morally flexible approach to her work. For the right price, she specialized in opposition research, a polite term for digging up or in this case creating damaging information about political targets. She'd been hired by a lawyer who worked for Whitfield's campaign, given a detailed plan, and paid handsomely to execute it. Her mission had been simple: gain access to the governor's mansion through legitimate employment, plant evidence of an affair, and ensure it would be discovered in a way that would create maximum damage. She'd executed the plan perfectly, hiding the items beneath the bed where they'd eventually be found during routine cleaning, then disappearing before anyone could connect her to the scandal. Agent Scott had the evidence. He had the money trail. He had Elena Cortez's real identity and photographs of her, both as herself and as Jennifer Reeves. He had communications proving the conspiracy. Now he needed to find Elena herself and get the final confirmation that would clear Governor Castellano's name. Tracking Elena Cortez took another week. She'd gone to ground after completing the job, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd kept her social media accounts active under her real name, occasionally posting photos from what appeared to be a vacation in the Caribbean. Agent Scott worked with international law enforcement, and finally she was located in a resort in the Bahamas, living off her $50,000 payday. With cooperation from Bahamian authorities, Elena Cortez was detained and extradited back to Florida to face charges of conspiracy, fraud, criminal trespass, and falsifying evidence. When confronted with the overwhelming proof Agent Scott had compiled, she made a choice: cooperate and receive a reduced sentence, or face the full weight of federal and state charges. She chose cooperation. In a recorded statement with her attorney present, Elena Cortez confessed everything: how she'd been hired by Whitfield's campaign lawyer, how she'd created the Jennifer Reeves identity, how she'd gained employment at the mansion specifically to plant the evidence, and how the entire operation had been designed to destroy Governor Castellano's career and clear the path for Senator Whitfield's election victory. The press conference on November 2nd was unlike any Florida had seen in decades. Every major news network carried it live. The state capitol press room was packed with journalists, cameras, and spectators. And at the center of it all stood Agent John Scott, Governor Richard Castellano, Attorney General Patricia Morrison, and FBI Special Agent David Torres. Agent Scott stepped to the podium first, his expression calm and professional. For the next 20 minutes, he methodically laid out the entire investigation: the fake identity, the planted evidence, the money trail, the confession, and the political conspiracy behind it all. He presented photographs, documents, financial records, and video footage. He named Elena Cortez and detailed her role. And most significantly, he named Senator Marcus Whitfield as the person who'd orchestrated the entire operation. Governor Richard Castellano is innocent, Agent Scott stated clearly, his voice carrying across the silent room. He was the victim of a deliberate and criminal conspiracy designed to destroy his reputation and remove him from office through fraudulent means. The evidence proves beyond any doubt that he never had an affair, never touched the items found in his home, and never betrayed his wife or his office. He was framed. The room erupted in questions, but Agent Scott continued. Senator Marcus Whitfield, through intermediaries and using campaign funds illegally, paid $50,000 to have false evidence planted in the governor's private residence. This was not politics. This was a crime, and everyone involved will face the full consequences of their actions. FBI Special Agent Torres stepped forward next, announcing that federal charges were being filed against Senator Whitfield, his campaign lawyer Robert Chun, Elena Cortez, and 3 other individuals involved in the conspiracy. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, election interference, obstruction of justice, and violation of federal campaign finance laws. Governor Castellano spoke last. His voice was steady, but emotion was evident in every word. For 4 weeks, my reputation was destroyed. My marriage was nearly ended. My children were subjected to harassment and cruelty, all because of lies, all because someone wanted power so badly they were willing to destroy an innocent family to get it. I want to thank Agent John Scott for his relentless pursuit of the truth, and I want to thank my wife Sarah for giving me the chance to prove my innocence. As he spoke, Sarah Castellano entered the room from a side door, their children with her. She walked to her husband's side, and for the first time since the scandal broke, they stood together publicly. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment of reconciliation. "I believe the worst," Sarah said quietly, speaking into the microphone. "I let pain and anger cloud my judgment. I should have trusted my husband, should have demanded answers before going public. I made mistakes too, but the real crime was committed by people who weaponized our marriage, who used intimacy and trust as tools for political destruction. I'm grateful to Agent Scott for giving us the truth, and I'm grateful that my husband never stopped fighting to clear his name." The press conference concluded with the announcement that Governor Castellano would be formally reinstated the following day, and that Senator Whitfield had been arrested that morning and was being held pending bail hearing. The political fallout was immediate and severe. Senator Whitfield's career was over. His own party abandoned him. Donors withdrew support, and calls for his resignation came from all sides. His campaign lawyer, Robert Chun, turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence, providing even more details about the conspiracy. Elena Cortez pled guilty to multiple charges and received a 3-year federal prison sentence. But more importantly, the Castellano family began the process of healing. It wasn't immediate. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But Richard and Sarah entered counseling together, committed to repairing their marriage. Their children, initially angry and confused, slowly came to understand that their father had been telling the truth all along. Governor Castellano returned to office with his reputation not just restored, but enhanced. He'd been the victim of one of the most elaborate political conspiracies in state history, and he'd fought back with truth rather than retaliation. His approval ratings actually increased. The people of Florida, it seemed, appreciated a leader who'd been tested and had emerged with integrity intact. Agent John Scott returned to his office, his work complete. He'd done what he always did, found the truth in a situation where lies had seemed more convincing. He'd proven that even in the darkest circumstances, careful investigation and persistence could expose deception and restore justice. 3 months later, Agent Scott received a handwritten letter from Sarah Castellano. In it, she thanked him not just for clearing her husband's name, but for giving their family a second chance. She wrote about the therapy they'd undergone, about the conversations they'd had, about the trust they were slowly rebuilding. "You gave us back our lives," she wrote. "You showed us that truth matters, even when everyone wants to believe a lie. Thank you for not giving up on us." Agent Scott kept the letter in his desk drawer, a reminder of why he did what he did. because behind every case was a human story, real people whose lives hung in the balance, whose reputations could be destroyed by lies, whose families could be shattered by false accusations. His job wasn't just solving mysteries. It was restoring truth in a world that often preferred sensational fiction. As for Senator Marcus Whitfield, he stood trial 6 months later. The evidence against him was overwhelming: the money trail, the communications, the testimony from co-conspirators. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His political career, built on ambition and destroyed by corruption, served as a cautionary tale about the price of choosing power over principles. The case became known as the Lipstick Conspiracy, a reminder that sometimes the simplest objects can be weaponized for the most complex schemes. A tube of lipstick and a pair of underwear had nearly destroyed a governor, ended a marriage, and altered the political landscape of an entire state. But they'd also revealed the truth, that in politics, as in life, the most dangerous weapons aren't always guns or money. Sometimes they're manufactured evidence and the willingness to destroy someone's life for personal gain. Governor Richard Castellano served out his term and chose not to run for re-election. He'd had enough of politics, he said, and wanted to focus on his family and on rebuilding the private life that had been so viciously invaded. He left office with high approval ratings and genuine respect from colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Agent John Scott moved on to his next case, another impossible situation where someone needed the truth uncovered. Because that's what he did. He found answers when everyone else saw only questions. He solved puzzles when everyone else saw only chaos. He brought justice when everyone else saw only injustice. And somewhere in Florida, a family that had almost been destroyed by lies was learning to live again, grateful that when it mattered most, someone had cared enough to find the truth. The lipstick and underwear that had caused so much damage were cataloged as evidence, stored in a federal facility, silent witnesses to a crime that had nearly succeeded. They served as a reminder that evil doesn't always come with obvious weapons or dramatic violence. Sometimes it comes quietly, hidden beneath a bed, waiting to explode lives with a single discovery. But they also served as a reminder that truth, no matter how buried, can always be found by someone willing to dig deep enough. And that justice, though sometimes delayed, ultimately prevails when good people refuse to accept convenient lies over inconvenient truths. Agent John Scott understood that better than most. And as he closed the file on the Castellano case and opened the next one, he carried with him the knowledge that his work mattered, not just to solve crimes, but to restore lives, to rebuild trust, and to prove that in a world full of deception, truth still has power. The case was closed. The family was saved. And somewhere in Florida, a governor and his wife looked at each other across the dinner table and remembered why they'd fallen in love 22 years earlier, before politics, before scandal, before lies nearly tore them apart. Justice had been served. And Agent John Scott had done what he did best. He'd found the truth, even when everyone else had accepted the lie.